About 6:25 this morning, I received a call from the officer in charge of the facility, indicating that based on a phone call he received from an unknown female, she indicated that prisoners would have escaped from the Holding Bay facility. 10 minutes after that, he got a call from the operations room as a result of information they received from the duty officer at the Holding Bay, that based on information he received, prisoners would have likely escaped from the facility. In keeping with the SOP, staff were called in, they made their way to the location, and they did two things. One, they reviewed the CCTV footage, and they would have conducted what we call a roll call or a physical muster. In the process of doing the review of the CCTV, it was observed that 3 prisoners crossed the fence, jumped the fence. The physical muster confirmed indeed it was 3 prisoners and their identity as well. As a result of that, we would have, well, the police, they were on the ground, but higher command would have been informed, and search parties have since been established, joint between prison officers and police, who are currently out with the aim of apprehending those persons who would have escaped. The 3 persons have been identified as remanded prisoner Travis Evans, who is there for murder, Lexroy Pollard, who was recently convicted. He was convicted last Friday for 2 years imprisonment for break and enter and larceny. And Sudesh Dayal, he is charged for break and enter and larceny and escape from lawful custody. All 3 prisoners would have, as I mentioned, escaped by jumping the fence. They used the portable toilet on the inside in order to gain some height. But I must mention that these prisoners would have escaped in very close proximity to a number of ranks who were performing security details in terms of being deployed in the tower to overlook what is happening at the Holding Bay. While there were several ranks mounted in the 4 towers, the escape occurred in close proximity to Tower 2 and 3, which had adequate amount of staff, but from observation so far and the little investigation that was done so far, it is clear that the ranks were not alert because the amount of time the prisoners took to make good their escape, even if for some reason the ranks were not fully alert, they had adequate time to get focus and observe exactly what the prisoners were doing and prevent what would have occurred. From the looks of things, I would not want to point to collusion as it is right now, despite the fact that detailed investigation has not been completed. It points to the fact that persons were negligent in the execution of their duties, whereby there is clear indication that they were asleep, and as such they were unable to observe the movement and actions of the prisoners. The first person actually crossed the fence at 4:29. The last person went over at 4:32. As I said, the razor wire on the fence is relatively firm, so persons had a struggle in terms of wriggling through the razor wire. Despite they took quite amount of time before attempting to cross the fence in terms of trying to separate the razor wire, that proved to be difficult for them because of the quantity of razor wire in place. But as I said, that happened completed at 4:32, and I would have received my first notification at 6:25. The officer in charge, however, indicated that it was sometime around 5 a.m. He received information which pointed to the fact that it might have been an escape. However, in keeping with the SOP, he would have activated that in terms of going to the location and starting the process of verification. One was to verify that yes, there was an escape, and 2, to verify the amount of persons who would have escaped and their identity. We have received some information. We have several teams out, as I would have mentioned, but none of the teams would have provided any feedback as having seen those escapees in person. It is just from members of the public who've been calling in so far. But all of the leads we've been receiving so far, we are working together with the police in terms of ensuring that persons are deployed to all of those locations. You see, many times these situations might want to point to that, but clearly the SOPs that are in place are SOPs that were clearly studied and can be very effective if they are administered the way they ought to be. Again, hopefully by the end of the investigation, we will see exactly where persons would have blundered in the execution of their duties, because not only should ranks be deployed to the towers to maintain security, but the procedure in place requires that the supervisors on the ground do hourly checks, physical check and visual checks to ensure that those persons who are mounted in the towers are alert. It comes back to the fact that it was due to the perceived lack of alertness that resulted to the prisoners being able to make their escape. It is clear that prisoners will always attempt to escape, and that is why we have systems in place to prevent it. And as I would have mentioned, from our planning, the SOPs are sound. It was the failure of the execution of the SOPs from the preliminary investigation that resulted to the escape of the 3 prisoners. In such a matter, we will be guided by legal advice. The police will do their detailed investigation. I'm quite sure the file will be submitted for legal advice, and based on that, the necessary steps will be taken to administer disciplinary action against those persons who are found culpable in this situation. Those persons who are at large are always being sought by law enforcement authorities. As I would have mentioned in the past interview, despite you might not see active pursuit of those persons, there are several activities taking place that are geared towards the recapturing of all those persons who are at large.